Hello, host Eric here, host of Talking with Famous People, and I want to talk this evening in this episode a little bit about the discourse critique that the policy team, I'm having my policy team run, um, and they've named the AF the Save Jeff Chen AF, and it's based on the fact that Jeff Chen is the motive for the affirmative. Actually, it's a discourse critique that says an individual's capacity to make decisions is predicated on their ability to understand possible paths, which is predicated upon their the available arguments. So, in a naturally occurring ecosystem of ideas, all arguments are there are no sacred arguments. They all they all are subject to scrutiny, and they're all subject to scrutiny in the land of rhetoric where no actual harm happens. And so my position basically is that the Chinese government, by artificially truncating the range of argumentation that's acceptable, they have created human beings who are incapable of making the right decision until and unless they are liberated from the limitations of that rhetorical pruning that they've been subject to. And so, as a consequence, the U.S. ought to do a bunch of rhetorical things as behaviors to force China to acknowledge the rhetorical tool of reciprocal burdens and to evaluate things accordingly. So that's the discourse K I'm running, and I think it's not just applicable to China, it's applicable to everyone everywhere, that to the extent that we want people to be able to engage meaningfully in problem solving at a public policy level, it requires them to be able to engage in detached rhetorical exchange in which they can argue both sides of a position, in which they can seek to find flaws in their own arguments, their own beliefs, as well as to find them in the countervailing beliefs. And that if we successfully engage in the process, namely, we parse it out correctly and engage all the right argumentation, that the right arguments will win consistently. And so it's a good enough way for us to determine public policy. But it can't be used if people aren't capable of engaging in detached argumentation. If they're already predetermined to favor only arguments that agree with one side and to dismiss all arguments that oppose that side, or to reduce the argumentation chains to teams or other people with whom they like or don't like or agree, with whom they agree or disagree. If we allow that to happen, then that's when you get bad public policy. So, Saren mentioned I'm not always behaving in a way that is customer friendly, I guess. Depending on the nature of the customer and what they're saying in the comments. If I think somebody's saying something dumb, I'm gonna call them out on it. If I think somebody's making a bad argument, I'm gonna call them out on it. If I think somebody's advocating for a position that I find reprehensible, I'm gonna call them out on it. And I don't know. That may be unwise, but it would be wrong of me to do otherwise. My basic point is I'm trying to fix things a little bit, at least. I actually have a sense of I'm gonna try to do social good in some way, right? I I never really had that notion before, but now I do, and my strategy is the same way I've been doing good in the past, which is coaching debate, but instead of coaching it for competition, coach it informally by just, I guess, demonstrating it and schooling people as need be. So, yeah, it's super exciting. I'm just absolutely giddy.
Congratulations, Eric.
Thank you, JC. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I basically just came on. I came on and you were talking, and I was just like, let me not interrupt him. But really, I just wanted to come on and be like, congratulations, Eric.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's great. I'm so stoked. And
You wanted it so bad.
I know. And I was telling Mega Bro, I had to resist the urge to go and like meow, 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 meow to people on Facebook who were certain of whom deserved to be meow meowed, you know, because they were really discouraging. And I want to go say, fuck you! See? But I didn't do that. I didn't do that. That's how petty I am. That's how childish I am by nature, right? Anyway, thank you. I appreciate the congratulations. And yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day. So, what are we talking about in this video? Oh yeah, fucking debate stuff. It might go down in 9.99. Go ahead.
We're speaking about Mr. Chen and how your policies on China, so you feel that they're not able to speak their minds more and talk freely. And I feel like the firewall of China, or their big, what's it called, filters that they have up that restrict their citizens from debating or talking, is their method of controlling the people there. And of course, yes, there a lot more people in China are getting cell phones more, and they're finding loopholes around the firewall, but it's not enough to make a social change come about. Like New York with what was it called? The Wall Street, when they took over Wall Street. When there's a pendulum swing.
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street, correct. So when Occupy Wall Street, the dominoes just fell, and the people figured out there's more of us than them, and if we wanted to, we could take over the city.
Well, but that's not true. I mean, there's not more of us than them. Us and them distinction is arbitrary and is based primarily on us being a bunch of young people who don't understand economics and them being regular people who have jobs and stuff. So, I mean, the Occupy Wall Street, as far as I'm concerned, was just pointless. I mean, what are you guys even there for? Just to sit there and be upset? You don't even know what you're upset about. And that's the thing. There's no concrete thing to be upset about. They don't like corporations, but that doesn't mean anything, you know.
Well, they could have gone on the route of making another political party or something, but they didn't have no leaders there to actually stand up for them, because they'd get arrested on sight.
That's not why, though. The reason they didn't form a political party is because they had no concrete and clear agenda. Except we don't like corporations, which is not an agenda. And a false understanding of where wealth comes from and how it's generated, so that there's this misunderstanding of why there's income inequality. That's it. A bunch of confusion. Confused youths. We call that the confused youth hour. Okay, so...
So that makes us better than China, then? Or the people there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, see, I want that sort of engagement to happen. I want those confused youths to come up and tell me their confused youth ideology, so I can explain to them why they're wrong. Now, I am subject to the same thing. Keep in mind, anybody's able to come up and tell me when I'm wrong, too. And I tell everybody this. You're welcome to yell at me, too. Of course, the problem is, chances are, I've thought through it a lot already. I'm probably not going to say something that's not really defensible on a hard, clean, non-messy argumentation scale. Right? It's going to be clean when I'm arguing, whatever it is. It's going to be purposeful. It's going to be meaningful. It's going to be concrete. It's going to not be subject to reification fallacies or other group issues. It's going to be specific. It's going to be well warranted and all those other things. Most people don't expect that much of themselves when they make arguments. I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem with society. People don't expect much of themselves when they make arguments. Like, I think you feel some sort of solidarity with Occupy Wall Street, but there's nothing to feel solidarity with. They have no
Oh no, I was
position.
just comparing them to the hierarchy of the Chinese government, the people that are currently in charge.
You were comparing Occupy Wall Street to the Chinese government. Well, the Chinese government is the Chinese government's in a difficult place, right? Because I think that unlike some authoritarian regimes, the Chinese government actually does primarily concern itself with the well-being of the country. I think they're just subject to the same wrongness that most of their people are subject to, and they're convinced that they also have the natural attachment to power, right? So it's been a long time since Tiananmen Square, and who knows what would happen if people tried to protest again in China right now. But the thing is, um, if from Chinese citizens who speak English, which presumably means they're the more educated Chinese citizens, if from them I get a reaction like I got on the China video, where they're saying um, that it is wrong of me to critique China for aggressing against Taiwan, and are unable to recognize how their arguments don't work right, or why that's not responsive. They don't know any of that stuff. Well, then, we have a serious problem, because this is why I say the United States government needs to say, yes, Taiwan is an independent nation. We're going to treat it as an independent nation. And here's why. Here's our logic. And if they say, but the U.S. doesn't act like that, we'll say, to the extent that we don't, it's wrong of us, and we're going to stop behaving like that. We're going to behave differently going forward, and that's how we're going to behave. We're going to adhere to these principles. We agree that all nations make mistakes and stuff, and we all do bad things sometimes. And we're determined to stop that right now. So I want to make clear, China, we're not doing anything to you at all. We're not threatening you or anything. We're just letting you know that Taiwan is our ally. It's an independent nation, and we like to stand with our allies should they be aggressed upon. That had nothing to do with you. We know you're not going to try anything like that because you understand the reciprocal burdens test. And here's what it is. Make that part of the public foreign policy to say, this is the decision we're making, and here's the logic behind it. And here's the reciprocal burdens test, and we need you to start applying this to China, so that if you want to argue with us about something, argue it on point. Otherwise, you're wasting everyone's time. It's the only way we can fix them.
Yeah, I see that. You could probably go the moral route and tell them, hey, you know what? They're your own blood, and you're going to kill them and your own people, just because they don't agree with you on certain subjects or ideals. So yeah, I don't know. That could be a possible thing to bring up in the UN or something.
Well, I mean, but my position is not in the UN. The United States currently is playing this tap dance where they say, okay, we're not going to recognize Taiwan as an independent nation because China is going to freak out if we do. But we're going to treat it as an independent nation, and we're going to have these 5 principles that we hold, that we say, well, we're behind you, Taiwan. You get these 5 principles. We don't actually call you an independent nation, but we give you these 5 principles that say the United States government is going to treat you kind of like an independent nation. My position is that's playing into the rhetorical disability that is underlying so many poor decision making. So much poor decision making by China and by everybody else in the world. Everybody needs to understand the logic by which decisions are justified or not justified, and be held to account to that. And say, if you in your country really think that you are correct to do this, then win the fucking argument. Win the fucking argument. It's that simple. If you're right, you can win the fucking argument. But,
Do you know if they still trade with each other or not? Like Taiwan and China?
oh yeah, they're major trading partners.
Then I don't get that. That's an oxymoron.
Well, I mean, this is China's sneaky way. They're doing it this way on purpose. Same thing they did with Hong Kong, right? They're trying to be like, oh, we'll split the baby in half. We're in charge, but we'll still let you kind of run things the way you've been running them because we'll get more money that way.
Well, I'm pretty sure they want the natural resources and the land claim or sea claim as well back. They can push their borders out more if they had Taiwan in the mix. So their sea,
but they have
they
plenty of
established
land.
those islands.
They got all the fucking land they possibly didn't know what to do with. Land is not a problem for China.
No, what I was referencing is that they can make those islands more islands of those military bases, like closer to their area as well to protect them even more. So to push the United
Okay,
States out of their international sea waters.
fine. Does that justify the U.S. invading Cuba?
We ever get them to be our? Well, I guess we still kind of can consider that because they don't have a military force anymore because Russia's not backing them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it does. I don't think we've ever been justified in any of the bullshit we pulled with Cuba. And I mean, my position is hold every nation accountable, which means don't go and fuss at them about what they're doing internally, because at the end of the day, that's gonna wash out, right? Fuss with them what they're doing externally, and say every nation has to behave the same on an international scale, has to adhere to these same basic rhetorical rules on an international scale, and has to win the argument on an international scale. Fuck the UN. The UN's a pointless body of compromise. What we need
Do that too.
is a
100%.
simple policy. It is, we are going to do the right thing. This is our ethical position. This is the ethical position. This is why it's the ethical position. This is therefore our position. And we have to have a straightforward line in the sand kind of a politics where we say, look, we're not going to aggress upon anybody. We're going to get the fuck out of the Middle East. We're going to stop aggressing on people at all. But if you're our stated ally, I'd make Taiwan part of NATO. I'd make Ukraine part of NATO. I'd make Estonia part of NATO. And I would be not unwilling to enforce those lines in the sand. Remember, they're the ones aggressing. We're responding. Responsive violence is different than aggressive violence. So, I mean, I think a clear-cut national policy eliminates the need for a UN entirely. The UN's fucking pointless. It does as much bad as it does good. And even when it does some sort of good, it's like, it just reinforces internationalism, which is itself a terrible notion. It's never going to work. The only kind of internationalism that'll work is the kind I'm describing, where there's a legitimate. The reason the U.S. would have to be hegemon at that point, I guess. I'm not in favor of hegemony. I'm just saying, because we have the most powerful military, we have the most responsibility not to ever aggress, which we fail to fulfill, and we have the most responsibility to defend free countries when they're free. And we can define free countries as those that protect freedom of expression and those that have regular transition of power through elections, actual transition of power. So, I mean, that's my position on foreign policy in general and on this whole issue of China and on the issue of rhetoric. That the problem is not one of behavior so much of us not using the right language. We need to if we just stop fucking bullshitting, it's like as a nation, we get up there and we play all this diplomacy bullshit. Lay it out there. Fucking just lay it out straight. It's not complicated. Everyone wants to compromise. This is the most compromises possible because there's no force being used, right? It's old language. It's saying, fucking win the argument. If you're too fucking stupid to win the argument, China, then you don't get to attack Taiwan. You can't win the argument? Maybe it's because it's the wrong thing to do. That's my position on it. That's why I'm ready.
Are you going more about moral rights or human rights?
Well, I'm talking about the duty of the nation state to behave in certain ways on an international scale. Now, whether it's difficult to say that a nation has rights or moral obligations, but it's not difficult to say that a nation state has duties. So I would say that the most moral outcomes are attained if individual human beings comprising the government behave in such a fashion as to uphold basic rights-driven deontological principles with the addition of responsive rights enforcement violences. The rights can be forfeit. I think that whole approach is just the way to go, because at the end of the day, even though governments don't have moral agency, they do have duties, and the individuals who comprise the government can behave in moral or immoral fashions, and that's independent of whether the government has authorized them to behave that way or not. So the decisions that are made by individual moral agents in service of government policy are moral decisions, whether they want them to be or not. And I think it's important that we don't as a nation, impose upon our government servants the duty to do immoral things.
By morally, I was just referring to like religion, what's it called, their beliefs and stuff in certain countries versus other places where they respect more their human rights, like in the Western civilization or Europe.
Right. Well, I'm not a cultural relativist. I'm saying that to the extent that a culture states that ethics are consistent with something other than individual rights, that culture is incorrect, that they have a harmful and wrong perspective on ethics, that if they insist on executing that upon their own people, so be it. But if they attempt to execute it externally, then the United States needs to stand in firm defense of any free country against whom those efforts are directed, because freedom, liberty, and the ability to do what we are doing right now is not something that is accessible to every human being on the planet.
You want it end there or keep going?
That seems like a good stopping spot. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Aaron, for contributing to this conversation.